Hi again, everyone. In this session, we're going to talk a little bit about coaching and teaching, some actual tips and things to think about to prepare for that role. It's very different to be in front of a classroom than being a student sitting in a chair listening to a teacher, as you'll soon discover. And it can be a bit of a challenge, and you guys definitely improve a lot in it. It's not the you definitely come out with a higher respect for your coaches and teachers, I think, at the end. We will go over a lot of practical advice on this during your orientation on site in Vietnam when you're about to begin. But I do want to start giving you a few things that we've learned and things to start thinking about in the meantime. So this slide talks a little bit about teaching, the part where you're in the classroom in front of the students. And I would encourage you to download the slides and look at the notes below the slide, in the box below it. That gives a little more description of each of these points that you see here. And I won't go into all of those here. But one of the first rules of teaching well is to prepare well. If you have gone over your lesson plan well the night before and know your material, it's going to be a lot more fluid. And you'll be able to deliver it in a more dynamic way. The kids will notice that you know it and be much more confident in your leadership if you do that. Part of that, as I mentioned maybe in the last presentation, is potentially asking us for the lesson plans in advance and reading over those, even on the plane if you want, but starting to think through a little bit what those topics are and have those bouncing around in your mind so you're comfortable with them before you come over. One area that's a little hard to teach, but to teach you kind of have to feel it, but remember that you are a leader and you are someone who is respected. Teachers are quite respected in Vietnam and they very much value education. So children will look up to you more than you would expect as a teacher. So your physical demeanor actually is important for commanding kids' respect. You want to be teaching standing up. You want to be nice and friendly and helpful, but realize that you are in an authority position that is very well established in Vietnam. And so the more you conduct yourself that way, the more they will recognize you in that role and follow what you're doing. We also definitely want you to be yourself. Each person has their own style. We do give you a lot of tips when you arrive, and we do give you lesson plans, but different people have different strengths, and following those and exploring those are also part of what will make you a good teacher. Another aspect that can be important is working out the dynamics and dividing the lesson plan and who has which role in the classroom. Most classes will have 4 people teaching, 2 Americans and 2 Vietnamese. We usually pair off in pairs of 1 American and 1 Vietnamese to teach kind of in tandem at a time, while the other 2 are maybe in the back of the classroom or sitting with the students, making sure that they're paying attention, helping out if need be. And then the teams kind of trade off at different points during the lesson. And so the more you guys are all on the same page and understanding how to work well together, the easier it will be. It'll definitely be initially something to figure out, as the Vietnamese haven't taught, and neither of you for the most part, and certainly neither of you have worked with each other before with the 2 cultures. So learning how to work through a translator, learning how to translate is certainly something to be adjusted to. So just be aware of that, and we'll definitely help out through that process. And also remember that you are a leader, so lead by example. We talk a lot to the kids about determination, doing our best, perseverance. So halfway through the camp, you're going to be tired. Everyone's tired, and there can kind of be a lull in motivation. And it's normal to have that, and you get through that and then end the camp strong usually. So it can be tempting to kind of slack off a little in the middle, maybe not prepare quite as well for your lesson, maybe let the kids get out of line a little bit more in class. Which is hard to then rein in once you've allowed those boundaries to expand. So if they see you slacking off, that somewhat underlines some of the messages we're trying to give. So they definitely look up to us more than you expect and are absorbing constantly a lot from our demeanor, our behavior, our decisions, and how we carry ourselves. So remember that at all points during the camp, whether it's during free time between classes, after camp, in the classroom, on the sports court, you're always a role model, and there'll be lots of eyes observing you. Shouldn't put any pressure on you, but realize that that's a really very important role throughout the camp. Another difference I want to make you aware of is that Vietnamese kids tend to be used to a very formal classroom setting, sitting, listening to the teacher lecture, and taking notes of exactly what the teacher says. There's a lot of memorization and not a lot of class participation. Part of that is due to the size of classes, which can often be 40 or 50 kids. So if you had a lot of kids asking questions, talking, it would be very hard to control the group. So we definitely believe that each culture has something to offer, and you will find various aspects of Vietnamese culture and classroom traditions that you might find attractive or better than what you've experienced growing up in the United States. But we do feel that something we can add as Americans is making these lessons interactive, fun, dynamic. And it isn't easy at first. The kids are not used to that, but they gradually open up and do learn to think critically, ask questions, volunteer to come up to solve a problem, to explain something to the class. They're not really used to that, but that's really something that makes the lessons, I think, more alive. And for some students, we hope that maybe the spark can come on and they realize that school doesn't have to be only about memorization of boring facts that I don't understand the meaning for, but it can actually be real. It can be applied to real life, and I can and I enjoy solving these problems, and it's exciting, and I want to have this more in my life. And lastly, you'll see at the bottom, plan personal time. The camps are pretty intense. We're working hard most of the day, and we all hit a lull about halfway through the camp where we're pretty tired. And it's important to make sure you get enough sleep at night, also for your health. Make sure your immune system stays well, get to bed on time. We have an early morning wake up, and also have some time to yourself. We're living in pretty close quarters, so if you're a people person, that works pretty well. If you're used to having a lot of personal space, it'll be a bit of an adjustment for you. But having some time, maybe going for a walk, having some time in your room by yourself, journaling, reflecting, thinking about what's going on, that can be pretty important to kind of keep a balance and thrive throughout the camp. So here you have several suggestions that are applicable both in the classroom and on the sports court as a coach. I will just hit on a few of them. On the right side, you see desire to help kids learn and grow. I found that the coaches that gain the most and really are excited by the time the camp is over about everything they've done are the ones that really have had their central goal is, I want to contribute something to the kids. I want to be a good teacher, a good coach, and give something to them. It's certainly one of the secrets to maximizing what you will get out of the camp. Paradoxically, I would venture to say that that's a secret not only to the camps but to a lot of aspects of life, that the more we give in any context, the more that experience means to us, and usually the more we actually gain from it. It seems a little the opposite of the more you give, the more you get. I guess that is a maxim. It's not so strange, but I've definitely seen that in practice, camp after camp, and in my own life as well. Also, the top one there on the right, enjoy getting to know your kids. There are a lot of kids. You will be on a couple teams, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, so especially those, but all the kids, the more you take a personal interest in them as a person, they're not just one of the many cute kids out there, but that's Tan and Tin and Bun. Those kids, they have names, they have personalities, you're getting to know them, even with the language difference. You'd be surprised how much you can really communicate and understand of each other and develop a real relationship. I hear that from many past coaches, that despite the absence of a common language, or sometimes even because of it, they've told me they feel you can form a different bond, and a more special bond in some ways than you normally would, when a lot of maybe just fluff gets in the way when we can communicate with words. So getting to know them is meaningful for you, and certainly will encourage the kids to be an active participant in the camp, and be open to learning and hearing the messages that we're hoping to communicate to them. And then be willing to learn. That's a really good one that I've found in different contexts when I've gone to a different country. We certainly are there to contribute and to give, but there's certainly a lot to learn, even from a kid in Vietnam who doesn't have very many years under their belt. There's a lot of things they know about the world and about life that we've never seen or experienced. And when they see us learning and being open to learn, asking them questions, it can be maybe Vietnamese language, how to make a craft. They make some quite amazing craft constructions with different kind of palm leaves, making grasshoppers, helicopters. You'd be surprised what they can do. So taking an interest in what they do know how to do and asking them to teach us really is exciting for a kid. They often don't have that at their age. They're on the low end of the totem pole, and to have this person they look up to interested in them and what they can teach us is pretty cool for them. And frankly, they can teach us some pretty interesting things as well. It's actually fun. So I definitely encourage that. It really opens doors, and they're way more open then to listening when we want to teach them something and when we want to draw them aside and maybe talk to them about how the team dynamics are going and how maybe they could improve in some area. So moving on to coaching, the sports, I would encourage you, these are just a few pictures of some coaches of past participants, but I would encourage you to think about your current coaches and past coaches you've had growing up in middle school and high school, and think of the ones that stand out to you as being good ones that you liked, ones that you learned from, ones that you really felt contributed to you in some way that you would maybe aspire to be like. And think about not just why do they have a positive view, not just the fact that they have a positive view in your mind, but think about what did they actually do? What was it about their leadership or about their teaching that stood out to you that was effective? You can't answer that right now, but I encourage you once this presentation is over and in the next few days to be thinking about some of those things. And you're not your coach. You don't have to do things exactly like they did, but and also because the context will be different in Vietnam. But think about some of those things and see which of those you could maybe incorporate into your coaching style. The same, I would say, would go for teachers in the academic part. But here on the left there are a few tips. It's also different because you won't be able to communicate with your words directly. They won't understand all your words. So demonstrating is very important. You can do a lot with body language. The Vietnamese coaches will be with you translating what you say, but especially in something like sports, it can be hard to describe well what you're talking about. So even with the basic drills, show them what you're doing. Show them what you want them to do. And even when you're working with the kids, often the 4 coaches teaching the sport will break up and be working individually with kids. And so you might not have a translator at your side, someone who can help with that. But you can really communicate a lot with body language by showing them what they're doing and then wagging your finger saying, no, not like that, and then showing them how you want them to do it, or holding their arm as they're serving the ball to accompany them in the motion the first time, for example. So not just telling them, but being with them directly physically really helps a lot. Obviously, practice is good. You want to build up to playing games, and you want to make the drills fun. Remember, they're not varsity student athletes, so you want it to be fun, but each drill you want it to be instructive as well. So whenever you can incorporate it into a game, it makes it fun for them, but make sure the games are ones that have an objective in mind, even if the kids might not recognize it, that they're actually working on some fundamental skill, bumping in volleyball or dribbling in basketball, for example. You could make it a relay race or some sort of point system with 2 teams. Who serves the most balls in the court correctly or hits a target in tennis. You could set up a target and see who can hit that. This next slide talks about a very important aspect of the camp, and that's living and working with the Vietnamese college students who are also coaches. Before I get to that, I'll start at the bottom here with a suggestion about coaching itself. And I would suggest for coaching that you think about the sport that you're coaching once that's been communicated to you, and think through some drills, what you can do. Have a variety of drills depending on the skill level. A lot of the kids will be at a basic level, particularly the girls who usually don't participate in sports, and they kind of have to get out of their shell and get used to not being shy about running and kicking a ball. But some of the sports are a little bit higher, the kids in general, soccer and volleyball particularly. But we don't give you a set lesson plan because you usually know your sport and have been through a lot of drills, and there's a wide range of drills available and ways you can approach it. We really want to give you freedom in how to do that rather than giving you a specific guide to follow. So before you leave, maybe look up on the internet for your sport some drills. Look up on YouTube various ideas or on Google as well. There might be some online descriptions. Again, as I said before, it's very different to coach a sport than to teach it. I've played basketball my whole life, but I'm not particularly great at coaching it. I don't have that much experience doing it. And so to think back of those drills that I did when I was first learning, those first dribble drills, shooting drills, I don't remember them all that well. And you definitely want to have an idea and make them fun. So usually you can adapt pretty well when you're there. But while you still have a good internet connection that's fast and reliable and available, it might be useful to think through that and jot down a list of possible ideas for middle school age kids. So moving to the main topic of this slide, the dynamics between Vietnamese and American coaches, you will be teaching together, coaching together, eating together, having fun together, rooming together. It's pretty much for the whole 3.5 weeks. We'll be together as a group, the staff, the American and the Vietnamese coaches. So we'll be a team, we'll be a family. So just like your family at home, that's a really fun, exciting time. Sometimes there can be a few conflicts. Not everyone has the same way of doing things, the same opinion. Sometimes we wish we had a little more personal space. Sometimes we're glad we have that person in our room to really share what's going on and process the day with. But because the cultures are so different, there will be added dynamics there. All the Vietnamese coaches speak English quite well, especially given that the Vietnamese is such a different language. Once you start trying to learn Vietnamese, you start to appreciate how impressive it is that they're able to speak English as well as they are. But it certainly isn't their first language, and they will be improving as the camp goes on, as they get used to speaking 15 hours a day in a foreign language. It's pretty tiring for them. They do a good job, and they're worn out at the end of the day. Their Vietnamese culture is very welcoming. We'll make a lot of cultural faux pas that we probably won't even realize. And they're usually very accepting, very gracious about that. They realize we're coming from a very different background, and they include us quite well. As you see from the picture, they're full of smiles, and that makes our job a lot easier, integrating with them. But realize that you're both coming from a very similar perspective of being thrown in with a group that you're not used to, and kind of feeling each other out, figuring out what's polite, what is the standard of communication, and things like that. It's a learning process. So one of the things you'll have to get used to is speaking maybe English a little bit more clearly, enunciating a little bit more, using simple words. If you use a lot of slang all the time, it can be a little hard to understand. Most of Vietnamese coaches' experience with English is in the classroom, so they're not used to a lot of fast-talking American slang. So that's definitely a skill to be learned. Using clear, grammatically correct sentences makes it a lot easier for the Vietnamese coaches to follow along and translate and understand well. I definitely encourage both groups to mix, to get to know each other, to make an effort. It can be easier and comfortable to just go with the people that speak the same language, that look like us, that come from the same background on both sides. And so it can be a little bit like oil and water initially, which is one reason why we mix up the roommate situations. Usually, though, if people do put in the effort, that barrier gets broken quite rapidly, and it's one of the more special parts of the program, that this is someone, college student just like you, and you're becoming friends with them and keep up with Facebook in years in the future. Sometimes go back and meet them again. From a couple years ago, I know people are planning when they graduate to maybe meet up with their Vietnamese coaches and travel around southern China together as a possible plan. So it's definitely a special part of the camp. And so I encourage you, despite the fact that sometimes it might be easier to just talk fast in English to the American sitting in front of you at the table, to turn to the Vietnamese coach sitting to your left, who might be feeling a little left out of the conversation because you're going back and forth so fast, and try to include them, ask them questions, get to know them. Even if I'm just speaking with the American in front of me, maybe slow it down just a little bit and enunciate so that the Vietnamese can follow along and maybe join in the conversation. It takes some courage to jump in a foreign language when it's native speakers speaking with each other, but they do appreciate it when they can, when we're being sensitive to include them in the conversation as much as possible. And certainly they're a huge resource for learning about Vietnam, their views on the world, their views on America, what they experienced growing up, what they hope for in life, what college is like. It's really pretty cool. So get to know them, ask questions, take initiative, and that'll definitely break the ice, and they'll feel more free to do the same with you. And definitely we have a lot of fun. The group generally comes together really well. We go to karaoke one night, which is really popular in Vietnam, maybe singing some Britney Spears and Michael Jackson, and so we have a lot of silly fun in the evenings on top of all the hard work that we do planning the lessons and actually teaching. And actually, in terms of teaching itself, they're a good resource. ask them directly. Ask them what's polite in Vietnam. How should I deal with this situation when the kid isn't behaving? In America, we would do this, but is that a good idea in Vietnam? Do you have any other ideas? Include them in that. They know the local culture well, and they're a great resource for brainstorming together about how to approach certain situations, how to make the lesson more interesting, how to deal with that difficult kid that always is looking out the window and making noise or something like that. Lastly, to wrap up this presentation, we have a list of words that could be useful while you're in Vietnam. We don't expect you to memorize these or learn these before you come, partly because some of them will be different than what you need. It depends on which sport you're teaching, which ones you'll want to know, and also because it's pretty hard to know how to pronounce these words. Some of them are pretty similar to exactly what you would expect, such as soccer. The second word of soccer is da, similar to in Spanish. The pronunciation and spelling, but the first word in southern Vietnam is pronounced bom, as if it was B-O-M. And let's see, there's some other words. If you look in the bottom right, net, under volleyball, L-U-O-I, that U-O diphthong is pronounced so that's löi. Or something like that. I don't pronounce it perfectly, but in any case, these will be much easier when you're on site and the Vietnamese coaches and kids will be with you, so it's easy to point at something or ask what something is or how to say something and repeat after them. This is just to stimulate your thinking and prepare you to be wanting to learn a little bit of Vietnamese. The coaches impress me every year by how much you learn in a short time, and some coaches really learn not just a couple dozen words, but well over 100 words that they throw into conversations at different times. It can be very effective both for teaching and coaching. If you're teaching math, for example, knowing basic numbers 1 through 10, knowing plus and minus, you can actually teach half a lesson almost as you're writing on the board using the words. Often the kids say, they're like, oh, we understand, and don't even need translation from the Vietnamese coaches. There's certainly no burden in feeling like you have to communicate everything in Vietnamese, but throwing a few words in while you're teaching your lesson makes it way more interesting for the kids and does help communicate better. While you're out on the sports court, it's particularly easy. Shoot, pass are commands you can easily yell out to the kids in the middle of the sports action without having to say something in English and have the Vietnamese coach translate, and then the moment's passed. Also, some things that can be really useful are quiet. Everybody come here. Hold the balls. That's an important one. If everybody's dribbling, you can't talk. So that's one of the first things to teach them. Hold the balls. If you learn how to say that in Vietnamese, it's pretty easy. It's a couple words. You just say it. The kids listen to you, and they respect you because you've learned that. And it can be pretty fun to realize, wow, such a foreign, different language. And when I came, I didn't understand anything. And hey, now I can talk to people and communicate a few things and feel comfortable with some of this basic vocabulary. It's kind of fun. I encourage you to go on YouTube, just look up Vietnamese and listen to what it sounds like. It's definitely a unique sounding language. Probably it's a tonal language like Chinese, Thai, several Asian languages, meaning that the voice can go up or down and up or stay flat, and it means different things. So for example, if the voice goes up, like asking a question in English, that's a tone. So ma are 3 different words. I don't recall right now what each of those are, but those are 3 different words depending on if my voice stays flat, goes up, goes down and up. So that's definitely a challenge for those of us who have not grown up with a tonal language. But the grammar is pretty simple, and it's fun to try. So yeah, as you can tell, I like languages and cultures, and learning both some of the culture and learning to throw in some Vietnamese words, and hopefully I'll improve a lot this summer as well. Is pretty fun hobby and an accomplishment by the time you leave as well. But certainly no pressure on this. Okay, well that's the end of this presentation. The next presentation we'll talk a little bit about packing, a list of things to think about bringing, and that'll wrap up our information sessions to give you an idea of what to expect coming to Vietnam. Feel free to share these as well with parents or coaches if someone wants to know more about the program. And as always, if you have any questions on any of these aspects, definitely write us an email, call. We're happy to answer these questions ourselves or to put you in touch with past coaches. Almost invariably, past coaches really care about the program, their time in Vietnam, and ask me year in and year out how the program is going, who's coming from their school. And so people are often very willing to and enjoy very much being in contact with future coaches and kind of talking about their experiences and answering questions. So definitely don't hesitate on any of those counts. Thanks a lot for listening.